And thank you for joining me today. I'm Hawkeye, and this is Maple Leafs Man Advantage. And today I'm going to talk about the 1972-73 NHL season. We're going to take a look at that, take a look at the Leafs, where they ended up. And I'm actually, because we got two new teams being added, so we're going to have 16 teams in the league now. Um, I'm going to look at each of the teams in the NHL. Every team in the East, every team in the West, where they ended up, who played well for each team, all that. So as I said, we got 16 teams. The new ones, the new kids on the block, they're the Atlanta Flames and the New York Islanders. So at this point, you're going to have eight teams that make the playoffs and eight teams that don't. So it's like today, we have 16 teams that make the playoffs, but half of them don't. So it's like today's NHL where um, we got a 50-50 shot of making the playoffs. Although, that's not true because some teams have got better players than others. So that's not really correct. But half of the teams don't make the playoffs at this point. So there we go. The Leafs are still in the East. So we'll take a look at that. And we'll maybe start in that division. Now, I apologize for getting to do this in other seasons, but I remembered this time, so I wrote this down. I'm going to talk about some guys that played their final games in the NHL this season, the best. So we got Harry Howell. He was with the LA Kings at this point. This will be his final season, as well as former Leaf Ron Stewart. He was with the New York Islanders. This will be his last season, as well as two guys playing for the Leafs this year. That's Jacques Plante. He's going to be 44, as well as Bobby Bond. This will be his final season as well. He only did play 5 games though, but this will be his last year. But we got a great list of rookies coming into the league playing their first season. So we got Robbie Ftorek with the Detroit Red Wings. We got Bobby Nystrom and Billy Harris with the Islanders. Bill Barber with the Flyers. Steve Shutt and Larry Robinson with the Montreal Canadiens. Excellent group there. Great group of rookies. So as I said, we'll start with the East, start at the top, go down to the bottom, and look at each of these teams. And in first place in the East, yeah, they were kicking it this year. It was the Montreal Canadiens. They, after winning that cup, you'd think, okay, they're gonna springboard into the first. Didn't happen. It's happening now, though. They had an excellent season. They had 52 wins, 16 ties for 120 points. That is a ton. And there was only 78 games played. And if it was a tie game after 60 minutes, it's a tie. Okay, everybody goes home. They only had 10 losses on the year. Wow. Um, they usually are back in the old days. They're stacked in Montreal for sure. Scotty Bowman is now behind the bench for the Habs. Look out, NHL. Here they come. Jacques Lemaire led the squad. He had 44 goals and 95 points. Yvon Cornway, he also had 40 goals. They had Kenny Dryden in that. He was their main option for the Habs. Uh, he won the Vezina. He led the league with 33 wins. Led the league with his 926 save percentage. Led the league with his 2.26 goals against average. And also led the league with his 6 shutouts. Yep, he won the Vezina. He was the top goalie in the league that season. Montreal was second in the league with goals, with 329, and first in the league with goals against. Um, and they only allowed 184. That is not very many. Meaning Montreal had a goals against of 2.36. Wow. Your own goaltending had to be that good to beat Montreal. They had a goal differential of 145. Amazing. That is a big wow there. No one in the league came close to that goal differential. That was it. So Montreal is looking to get back to the Stanley Cup Finals, and and take that cup home again. We'll see in a later video if they do that. So in second place, still looking good, was the Boston Bruins. They were still great as they had 51 wins, just one less than Montreal. But they had 107 points. Montreal had 11 more ties than Boston did, making a large portion of that 13-point difference. There it is right there. Um, Phil Esposito was still leading the league. He had 55 goals, 75 assists, and 130 points. He led in all those categories. So yeah, he won the Art Ross for sure. He also led in shorthanded goals with 5, game winners with 11, and shots with 411. But he didn't win the Hart. We'll get to who wins that later. Bobby Orr still in Boston. He won the Norris, top defenseman, but he did only play 63 games. He missed some games this year, but he did still score 29 goals with 72 assists for 101 points. In net though for Boston, Jerry Cheevers, he was gone. He went over to the WHA. So that led Eddie Johnston as their main option for the Bruins here in Boston to start the season, anyways. He was 37 years of age now, Eddie Johnston. Still playing well, but his numbers, they weren't looking quite as sharp as they were in previous seasons. His save percentage was now 886, goals against of 3.28. But he still did get 24 wins and he had 5 shutouts. So there you go. The Bruins didn't really need him to play exceptionally to perform, get those 107 points in the season anyway. They're consistently great, but there you have it. In third was the New York Rangers, who are still looking quite solid and very good for a third place club. They had 47 wins and 102 points. Jean Rattel led the squad with 41 goals and 94 points. As I said I believe it was the previous video, Steve Vickers ended up winning the Calder Trophy for the Rangers, which is great for such an already solid team that you also have the Rookie of the Year playing for you. He had 30 goals for the Rangers this year. In net, they still had that great 1-2 punch, Eddie Jacquemin, who had 26 wins, and Gilles Villemure had 20 wins, but he did have the much better goals against of the two. He had a goals against of 2.30. Very good. Both of these guys are now in their 30s. So we're looking at some old goalies here, other than Kenny Dryden. He's not old. He's a young man. But Jackman's 33 and Villemure is 32. But at the same time, some of these goalies, they last longer than you may think they should. Jacques Planson-Trong, he's going to be 44, so pretty awesome stuff there. So, who's in fourth place in the East? It's been Toronto, but this year, making the very first appearance ever in the playoffs in their team's history is the Buffalo Sabres. And a big congrats coming from me to them. This is just their third year. I know there wasn't a lot of teams, but as I said earlier, half of the teams in this league or in this division aren't making the playoffs. They did it. So they had 37 wins and 88 points. Very well done there. Rene Robert led the team with 40 goals, and Gilbert Perreault had 88 points. He also won the Lady Byng. Perreault did. And in net for the Sabres was Roger Crozier, who had 23 wins, and Dave Dryden, who had 14 wins. Not a bad combo in net for the Sabres there as well, and they're off to the playoffs. So, just missing the playoffs now in fifth place was the Detroit Red Wings. It must have been an exciting end to the season here for fans in Buffalo and Detroit to see who was going to make the playoffs. Um, the Wings also had 37 wins, but they had 86 points, so 2 less ties. That was the difference between the two teams. They were coached by Johnny Wilson. Um, Mickey Redmond led the team with 52 goals and 93 points. Marcel Dion also had 40 goals for the Wings. This is just his second year. In that, they had a couple of older goalies in Roy Edwards, who had 27 wins. Um, and he was also tied with Dryden with his 6 shutouts. And the other option was Denis Desjardins, who may have not played as well as he did as the other goalie. He did win 8 games, but he did have a subpar 863 save percentage. Um, in comparison, Edwards was 904. That's a big difference. That's a 41 point difference. That's a lot. Which I don't want to hang the fact that Detroit didn't make the playoffs on one player, but that might be what they need to do is upgrade their goaltending next season. Get another goalie in Detroit if you can to try and help the goals against going on there. Because when I was looking at the Red Wings, they were actually sixth in the league in goals for. Very good. But they were eighth in goals against, which ain't that big of a difference, but um, they still had a 22 goal differential, so they're up 22 goals. But like if you their goals against should have been better, or it just needs improving. And if they can do that, maybe they can get into the playoffs again in Detroit if they do that. So in sixth place, it was the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're out of the playoffs. They had 27 wins and 64 points. More about them once I go through all the other teams, and we'll take a look into the Leafs and see what was going on there. Behind the Leafs in seventh place was the Vancouver Canucks, who may be improving, or they may just be taking advantage of the newly added New York Islanders. I didn't look at the records between Vancouver and the Islanders, how those games went, but the Canucks did have 22 wins and 53 points. Just not good enough for a third-year team, in my opinion. Bobby Schmaltz led the team. He had 38 goals and 71 points. In that, they had a few options, as they still had Dunk Wilson, who had 13 wins and an 880 save percentage. Ed Dick, he won 5 games. He had an 854 save percentage. And finally, Bruce Bullock, who won 3 games and had an 857 save percentage. So you can guess where they're still having problems in Vancouver. Um, yeah, and what they need to improve on, it's everything again. They were tied for 11th in the league with the St. Louis Blues with 233 goals out of 16. So that is improving, but they were 15th in goals against. They allowed 339 goals. That's a goal differential of minus 106. That is terrible. Nowhere near good enough. This is your third year, guys. You gotta get better. I understand they're in a tough division. They got some excellent teams in this division, but hey, guess what? The Buffalo Sabres were added the same year as them, and they just made the playoffs, and they ended up with 35 more points than you did. That is huge, and yeah, they just need to make some improvements in Vancouver, big time all over the ice, I guess. So, rounding out the East, in last place. This was their first year, so forgive them. They're just putting this team together. Was the New York Islanders? They had the worst record in the league. They were the worst team. They had only 12 wins and only 30 points. That's not a lot. It was rookie Billy Harris who led the team with 28 goals, and he was the only guy on the team that scored 20 goals. Usually, not all the time, but usually that's not a good sign if a rookie leads your team in goals. Sometimes it's fine. But it can be a bad sign. And it certainly was with the Islanders here. Harris also led the team in points. He had 50. And that they had their 2 picks from the expansion draft. So you had Jerry Desjardins, who had 5 wins. Um, but, you know, not all his fault. He also led the league. He had 35 losses. And then you have Billy Smith as well. He had 7 wins. So looking at their goals for and goals against, they were last in goals for with only 170. That means they only scored 2.2 goals a game. That's not going to get it done. And in reverse, or same in the other category, they were last in goals against, and they allowed 347. So if you thought it was bad in Vancouver, it's much worse in Long Island. Their goal differential was minus 177. Terrible. But wait, yes, you need help all over the ice, but there are parts on this team. I've mentioned some of them, like Billy Smith, Bobby Nystrom. They're going to be part of you guys winning the biggest prize you can win in hockey. So you're on your way. It may not look like it on the outside, but you're on your way. This is just your first year. Just keep building. And you're going to get the number one pick in next year's draft. And it could be a knockout that you're going to draft. Um, so there you go. And Billy Harris, he was your first ever number one pick or your first pick ever. He was huge for you in your first year offensively. So keep going with it. So there you go. So we're going to jump over to the West now, and no surprise to me, it's the Chicago Blackhawks who led the way with 42 wins and 93 points. Gone though is Bobby Hall. He's gone to the Winnipeg Jets in the WHA. They're still a very strong team though. Ex-Leaf Jimmy Pappin may have stepped into that role of Bobby Hall's. He led the team with 41 goals and 92 points. In net, they still had a strong Tony Esposito who had 32 wins, a sharp 917 save percentage, and four shutouts. Um, Chicago also had Gary Smith to play backup. He won 10 games for the Blackhawks as well, so they were leading the West. So in second place, it was the Philadelphia Flyers, who were now starting to perhaps show the way they were going to play. I can see it now. Definitely when I'm looking into this team deeper. Um, they had 37 wins and 85 points. Rick McLeish led the team. He had 50 goals. He also had 21 power play goals and he had 100 points. Cowboy Bill Flett, he had 43 goals for the Flyers, but it was Bobby Clark who was really impressing everyone in Philadelphia. He had 104 points, and it was him who won the Hart Trophy and the Lester B. Pearson Trophy that was voted on by the NHLPA as the Player of the Year. Um, and the Flyers also had a few guys, tough guys, 200 guys with 200 plus PIMs. Yeah, Don Selesky with 205, Bob Kelly with 238, and Dave the Hammer Schultz. He led the league with 259. Watching old hockey, I didn't like him. I didn't like Dave the Hammer Schultz. Man, he would get under your skin. I remember him attacking Boreas Solving one night. I may talk about that in a later video, but he was definitely a tough guy. Right there in Philadelphia, and he was allowed to play that game, and he did it well. And yes, these boys were not going to be getting pushed around in Philadelphia now. Definitely not. In that, they had a few options in Doug Favell, who put up some good numbers in winning 20 games, had a 916 save percentage and three shutouts. You also had Michel Bellumer, he won 9 games, and Bobby Taylor won 8. So you had a few options there in Philly in net as well. So in third place, this is as tight as you can get. As with the Flyers was the Minnesota North Stars. They actually have the exact same record: 37 wins, 30 losses, and 11 ties for 85 points. But it was the Flyers who led the head-to-head. They were 3 wins, 2 losses against the North Stars, so they're going to get second place. For the North Stars, it was Danny Grant who led the team with 32 goals, while Dennis Hextall, he had 30 goals and led the team with his 82 points. In Minnesota, they had a few options as well in net. They still had Cesar Maniego, who won 21 games. He had a nice 910 save percentage and five shutouts. Getting more playing time now was Gilles Gilbert. who won 10 games. He had two shutouts and still playing. Another old timer, 43-year-old Gump Worsley, still playing in Minnesota. He won 6 games and showing he could still play at such a high level at such an age. He was getting it done in Minnesota. They had three goalies there um, playing for the North Stars. So it was the St. Louis Blues that skated their way into fourth place as they had 42 wins and 76 points. Gary Unger led the Blues with 41 goals and 80 points. In net, they had a few options as well. They had Wayne Stevenson, who is now with the Blues. He had 18 wins. They still had Jacques Caron. He was there. He had 8 wins. And Bob Johnson, he had 6 wins for the Blues. So they were getting some different goaltending with the Blues after they were just pounded by the Bruins in the playoffs the previous season. They're trying some new guys in net. So there was a nice tight race in the West, like there was in the East, and just missing out on the playoffs was the Pittsburgh Penguins. They were in fifth place. They had 32 wins, just like the Blues, but they had 73 points, just a few back, so therefore three less ties than the Blues. Al McDonough led the team with 35 goals. Lowell McDonald had 34, and Sil Apps, he led the team with 85 points. In that, Jim Rutherford was the main man there. Played real well for Pittsburgh this year. He had 20 wins, a nice 912 save percentage, and three shutouts. He was also only 23 years of age. So even though they just missed the playoffs, maybe there's something beginning to happen here in Pittsburgh, maybe. But when I look, this all was also perhaps Rutherford's best season in net. Was this? He never really had a save percentage that high ever again. But there you go. And also just missing out was the LA Kings. They had 31 wins and 73 points, just like the Penguins. They were coached by Bobby Pulford. Leading the team was Mike Corrigan with 37 goals. Bob Barry, he had 36. And I think it's Jua Whitting led the squad with 70 points. I think that's how you say that name. I'm not sure of that player. In that, the Kings, they still had Rogie Vachon. He had 22 wins, and Gary Edwards had 9 wins. And those were your two dudes in net for the Kings. Good combination, but they did miss the playoffs. They were in sixth place. So in seventh place was the first year Atlanta Flames, which ain't too bad. They were coached by Bernie Geoffrion, and when I was looking at this team, it looked like they were having a good beginning to their NHL career. This team, they had 25 wins and 65 points. That's more than double what the Islanders did. That's 35 points more than the Islanders. The Islanders didn't even have 35 points. Um, Bob Leader led the team with 26 goals and 60 points. And in that, they turned to the guys they picked in the expansion draft. So you got Phil Muir with 16 wins and Dan Bouchard with 9. They were surprisingly good defensively, as they were seventh in the league in goals against, which is very good for a first team player or first year team. But their problem lay in their offense. That's where their problems were. They were 15th in goals for, as they only had 191 goals. So that's 2.2 or 2.5 goals a game. Um, that's a huge ask from your goaltenders to play that well, and some nights they did, but that's where they need to improve is in getting some more goal scoring in Atlanta. But still, good year there for that team. And here we go. In last place, it was the California Golden Seals. Golden Seals, who look like they're stuck in the mud here. They had 16 wins, 48 points, just nowhere good enough to compete for a playoff spot here with this team. Joey Johnston led the team with 28 goals. Walt McKechnie led the team with 54 points. In net, Joe Meloche was the main man, and nothing against him at all. I've seen him play. He was a good goalie, but he must have had nightmares this year, as he didn't play nearly as bad as the team stats would suggest. Um, he led the league in 59 games played. So he may have been more of a saving grace because if they had worse goaltending, boy oh boy, who knows how bad they would have ended up. So that's all 16 teams for the 1972-73 season, and I'm going to show for you now. Here we go. I'm going to grab my boop 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 team, my team, my Leaf team. So here we go. See if I can push that. Yep. Bring me for try and get them straight. So there are some same players here, and some that are different, different players. So different players up front. You got Mike Murphy on right wing. You got Boldarev at center, and I also have Gary Kroto at left wing. On defense, I got three different defensemen. I got Phil Russell, Tracy Pratt, and Neil Komodowski uh, on defense. Um, Paul Henderson's still there. He did get hurt this year. He only played 40 games. Um, so there you go. And if you look at my goalies, they're different. I got Plant. Like, guess who I still have in Toronto? I still got Bernie Perron. I would do my darndest to get that contract signed with Bernie, talk to him, let him know he's going to be the number one guy, and he's going to be the number one guy this year. Plant definitely will get some time, but Perrant will be getting maybe 2/3 of the time in the net now. And keep Plant there. He's 44 years old. Give the net to Perrant. Here we go. So, and yeah, so I just wrote out here. Now, like the previous season, the Leafs were in the playoffs, and this season they were not even close to making it. They were like 24 points out or something, where they were in the playoffs the previous season. You gotta ask, what were all the big differences between the team? Well, Henderson got hurt. He only played half a season. But the big thing, you don't have Bernie Ferrant anymore. You have Jacques Plante, and the other guy was Ron Lowe. And I'm not hanging this all on Ron Lowe. But Bernie Perron, he's a Hall of Fame goalie, guys. You needed to hang on to that guy. Now, um, when I put that up, like if I put Bernie in net instead of Ron Lowe playing for the Leafs, I think you can cut your goals against by 50. I think you could do that. I also think with my squad, I might be able to score 20 more goals as well. The difference, I got Mike Murphy, I got Boldarev, they had Errol Thompson. That's the big difference between the two. That's more goals for this squad. Um, so yeah, the Leafs, I think by crunching the numbers, the Buffalo Sabres had a goal differential plus 38. I would have a plus 39. Um, Now, does that make me make the playoffs? No, I'm going to still give that to Buffalo. I'm going to say we just missed the playoffs, but we missed by a point. We're in between them and Detroit, so it's going to get even tighter. But I'll still give that to Buffalo. They're making the playoffs, not me. Um, but as you see, I've got Gary Kroto. I needed to make a deal because Henderson got hurt. Um, so I worked out a deal. I sent Stan Weir, who I just drafted, and Ron Lowe. Um, they're going to need a goalie. Sure, why not? Send them to California. You give me Gary Kroto, and I'll take a fourth round draft pick in the next draft as well. And I got Marchenko as well. He was sent to the Islanders. So what I'll do, I'll work out a deal with them. Get Marchenko, and yeah, I'm going to. I'll work out a deal with the Islanders in order to get him. I didn't write it down. I'm sorry about that. I should have. I got it written downstairs on a paper. Exactly what I do. I love doing that, working it all out. And oh man, trying to figure all that out. I'll put it at the end of the video. Both of the trades I would do. Because yeah, I added Marchenko, I added Kroto as well. Grisdale, he was a Leaf that year. He was a free agent. This McElmurray, he was a free agent. And the rest of them were guys that I had drafted or were already there. So there were a couple of trades I had to make, but there you have it. Well, that will do though is it'll change my spot in the next draft, which is really unfortunate because the Leafs made an exceptional pick in the first round next year. But you know what? I'd rather have Bernie Perron. I'd rather have him in my net. He's a Hall of Famer, and he's going to get things going uh, for his teams starting next year. But but yeah, I say give Perron 2/3 of the game in net, and give Plonk the other third of the games, whatever. And there you go. So there you go. And as I said, I'll put that on here exactly the trades that I made this for this season as well. But until next time, go Leafs, go!